Hello! Today's show is brought to you by Zounds.com. Don't you hate it when you're trying to buy a new guitar or a pack of strings or something like that, or maybe a new cable or a digital interface, and you can tell that the person that you're dealing with has no idea what you're looking for? Well, that is not the case at Zounds.com, because Zounds.com are staffed up by real musicians, and they're ready to help you now. Zounds.com.
I'm walking the floor over you.
Walking the floor.
I'm walking the floor. Walking the floor over you.
Hola, senors and senoritas. It is Walking the Floor time. I'm Chris Shiflett, your host as always. How you doing? I know that you're probably not doing very well. It's been a weird week. It's a lot of depression in the air. It's a sad time. I get it. I feel it. I'm with you. I'm not happy about a Trump presidency either. But come on. Enough of all this wallowing in misery on everybody's social media feeds. Enough of blaming, these quote-unquote ignorant Trump supporters or the, uninspired millennials or the Bernie bros that, didn't vote for Clinton or whatever. Enough. Let's all sit down and reflect long and hard about how we got here. Who or what is responsible for creating the conditions that have made a Trump presidency possible? No matter how many times you shout, "He's not my president." Well, unfortunately, he is your president. He's going to be your president for the next 4 years, and he is going to do some fucked up shit. So get ready for that. Mobilize. Get informed. There's a great Glenn Greenwald article on The Intercept. I'll post it on my social media. I'll post it on my Twitter. Go check it out. Go read that. Go read Thomas Frank's article that was in The Guardian. Came out, I think, the day after the election. Go read any Chris Hedges article. As a matter of fact, go watch his show on RT.com. It's called On Contact. We need to start changing the way we think about our political system and the dominant ideologies of the last 30, 40 years or whatever. All right, that's my idea. That's my pitch. Now go do something. All right, enough about politics. Let's get to something a little more enjoyable. Let's get in the time machine and go back to last May, a simpler time, when Robert Ellis and I got together in my studio and had a great little conversation about all kinds of things. This is Robert Ellis on Walking the Floor.
I wonder if I could send this.
You get that, man?
I got this in India.
It was a long.
I got a bunch of.
Recording, by the way.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, I got a bunch of crazy shit made in India.
What were you doing in India?
Oh, it's very complicated. I was there for a month last year with my friend Johnny Fritz, and we were making a film, in quotations, and trying to make a record.
Oh, okay.
It was it was a crazy, harebrained scheme.
Okay. So you went to India to make a film and a record.
So me and Johnny went.
And did that get done?
Well, that
Is this working? This looks like it's working.
yeah, I think so.
You can choke up on that mic if you want.
It did not necessarily get done. It
But it led to other things.
we never intended for it to really, like, the point of the thing was Johnny wanted to make a new record and he wanted me to produce it. It was going to be very India influenced. So we just got to talking and I was like, let's just fucking go to India.
You can't have more Indian influence than being in India to make it.
So we spent a month there. I went knowing full well that it was going to be very difficult. Like, we kind of set ourselves up to fail. Like, we didn't, and we intentionally didn't plan anything. We didn't even plan where we were going to stay.
Really?
We thought that would all be...
That's a long way to go, man.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. We thought that would be better for the film, though. So we,
Right.
the filmmaker went with us, and like filmed everything, like us finding a like place, and we decided everything was decidedly going to be the cheapest it could be.
Right.
So our hotel was $2 a night.
Wow.
Like that kind of stuff.
It's nice to know that still exists somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know. If you saw it, you wouldn't think it was nice. You'd be like, this shit should be destroyed.
Right.
They shouldn't even be existing,
Yeah. I've never been to India, so that sounds kind of fascinating. Is the film that you shot gonna see the light of day, or has it?
Well, I think it's going to be a bunch of short, like YouTube things. We had like 30 hours of video, but it's just crazy. I mean, it was an insane month, and we'll see. It's up to Johnny. It's Johnny's thing. I went there for moral support,
right?
And, to be a part of it, and he since has made a record. I don't know when that's going to come out, but
and did it in fact bear the influence of Indian culture and music?
I mean, aesthetically, I don't really know. Like, there's not really like sitar on it. I don't think.
Right.
It was actually made here. My friend Taylor Goldsmith from Dawes ended up producing it here in LA.
Oh, right on.
And it's super electronic and awesome. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But it was the whole month there was like intentionally kind of a comedy of errors.
Right.
Like we went to studios in quotations,
right.
and like, talked to engineers and, we're white people in India. So like one of the studios we went to, and this is all videoed, which is amazing. It was just some dude's like office space with like an old Dell computer and a crazy looking digital console that I've never seen. And then a bunch of like 57s.
Right.
And there's a dude in the corner doing a like graphic design on MS Paint. You know what I mean? Like, it's like it was very shoddy.
Yeah.
And then when we talked about everything, I was like, Johnny, we shouldn't, like, this is shitty. We probably shouldn't record anything here. I think it's going to be more trouble than it's worth. And the language barrier is also really complicated. And then we got the pricing, and I was like, dude, definitely we're not recording here. The guy wanted to charge us like Nashville scale pricing for this studio in like the ghetto of Delhi.
Right.
Because we're white. I don't know how much it would have cost if we were Indian, but
right.
I can't imagine that they're getting that kind of money.
I did a tour a long time ago, like a punk rock tour down in Brazil, in 1998 with my friend's band. And it was kind of fascinating because one night you would be in this state-of-the-art, beautiful nightclub where everything was brand new.
Yeah.
And the next night you would play in like a concrete box that had no roof, and they were basically had like jerry-rigged a stereo system to be the PA or what, you know what I mean? Like
totally.
Because there's such a disparity in in just in income inequality and all that sort of thing down there at that time. Did you experience that sort of thing? It was like 1 minute you're in this like ultra modern super tech situation, the next minute you're in somebody's goat cart.
Yeah, I mean we intentionally sort of avoided the upper echelon of people. Like it's pretty strictly divided. So the neighborhoods we stayed in and tried to like really experience were the really poor neighborhoods.
Right.
But towards the end of it, our spirit got a little broken, and we were all really sick and tired, and so we started exploring a little bit. And you would be amazed at the things that me and Johnny took comfort in. Like, we went to McDonald's probably once a day because we found there was a McDonald's in the city center, and it was just like so clean feeling, like, and the food was like. Wasn't gonna make you, shit your brains out.
And McDonald's is the same everywhere you go.
It's the exact same.
It's just the comforts of home, even if you don't like it at home.
But yeah, we went the last weekend we were there. We went and met up with some friends of ours who are like wealthy socialites there, and yeah, I mean, we had been in complete poverty, and then now we're in like. We went to like a fancy like art opening or like some supermodel's house for a house party where we're all drinking like American liquor, and I mean it was the last weekend there, so we were just like, what the fuck is happening? Like this has been going on the whole time.
Right? Why didn't anybody tell us about this?
This is crazy.
Well, it sounds like a trip like that would really put like touring here at home into perspective.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't know what touring's like for you. Are you in like a van or a bus or
mostly?
How do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, this summer will be all in a van and trailer.
Right.
And it's been like a combination. I do a lot of flying, fly dates, and then over the past couple tours, I've been fortunate to like go on the bus with whoever I'm out with.
Do you take a band with you, or do you go just a man and his guitar style?
It depends.
Or both?
Yeah, both. It's kind of a financial necessity that I improvise with that, because some tours that I really want to take I just wouldn't be able to afford
Right.
bringing the band. You know,
Yeah.
like Richard Thompson asked me to go out, and he's like one of my heroes. You know?
Sure.
So, but he let me ride the bus with him, and because of that, I was able to make money and
Yeah.
and still, you know, hopefully be impactful. But if I had taken the band, I would have lost money on the deal and would have been very stressful.
Is that how did you start out in your early sort of forays into, being a performing musician? Did you start out as just you and your guitar, or were you in bands growing up?
I was kind of in kind of both. I always wrote songs and played my own shows like solo, but I also it's really weird. When I was like 17, 16 years old, I lived in this small town in Texas, and I worked at a fitness center that my girlfriend's mom owned. And
You seem very fit.
well, thank you.
It had a lasting impact.
I feel not very fit. But in this gym that I worked the front desk at, one day a guy came in who had a bunch of tattoos and looked a lot more similar to me than anybody else in that town. And he was probably in his 20s or
And what
early
town is it?
30s.
Is this where you grew up? What
Yeah,
town?
it's called Lake Jackson, Texas.
Okay.
It's a very small, shitty little chemical plant town, on the coast. But anyway, this guy and me got to talking, and he's, eventually realized that we're both musicians. He's like, yeah, I play guitar in a band. I didn't really think much of it, but then a couple months later, he asked me, he's like, man, our bass player broke his foot. Do you want to come out on tour with our band? And he played in a band with a guy called Roger Murray, who was in a band called Agnostic Front.
Oh, yeah,
And
sure.
So when I was 17, I went out with Roger's band playing bass, which was called the Disasters.
Okay,
and we
yeah.
did like punk tours.
Weren't they on Hellcat?
Yep.
Am I remembering that
Yep.
right? Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so you have a punk rock past.
Yeah, a little bit. I
Right.
mean, it was a complete freak coincidence
Right.
that happened,
Yeah.
But that sort of like was my first real touring, like really going out playing clubs and like having a rider and stuff
you were
like
17?
that. I was really young. Yeah, 17.
And your parents were okay with that?
Yeah, I dropped out of high school, and I was kind of a
too.
shitty kid.
Yeah.
So my parents were probably as okay with that as they were with everything else.
I was a shitty kid in the sense that I just blew it academically. I was not like a criminal, but I think I
neither.
was just kind of lazy and maybe a little unmotivated. I don't know
I think
where you
we-
fit in that scale.
We had things going on probably that took precedent
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
over high school.
Exactly. Yeah. Like girls and rock and roll and beer, man. Jesus, come on.
Yeah. So yeah, to answer your question, a bunch of different things. Through that whole time, I was still like writing my own songs, and I had like an indie band that I played with in high school, and then when I moved to Houston, I started taking sideman gigs and played in every kind of style and situation you can imagine, for a few years.
Well, what was growing up like for you? So Lake Jackson, is that where you said it was?
Yeah, it's an hour south of Houston. It's maybe 20,000 people.
Okay.
Feels very rural and very suburby.
And you said there's a
know.
chemical plant. There was that sort of the main
Yeah.
economic driver in that town.
Yeah, that's why anybody ever moved there.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing there except that, and everybody's dad worked for the plant.
Right.
I come from like 3 generations of people that worked for the plant.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, my great grandfather, his father moved there because when Dow Chemical put their plant there, that's where the first settlement was, and they had like company housing. And
Yeah, right,
My
right.
great great grandfather moved there for Dow, and that's why my family ended up settling there.
Oh, interesting.
It's very weird that town is like, for better or worse, just inextricably connected to that industry.
Right.
And it's I don't know. That was the
I mean,
name.
so many American towns that were inextricably connected to whatever industry happened to be there have completely crumbled as
Yeah.
we've deindustrialized America. But they still have that plant there.
This one's booming.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. They're like
That's kind of like an anomaly.
they're developing. From what I hear, they've opened up. So there's like a local college too that has all these programs directly connected to the plant.
That do all the research for the chemical. Oh,
and you
fascinating.
could graduate high school, go to the local college, then go straight to the job at the plant.
Well, now, why do
know
you
what I
think
mean?
that the plant doesn't just move across the border or move to somewhere in China or something? What's kept it there?
I don't know. Who knows? I can't imagine that there are a ton of regulatory issues And I mean, let me put it this way. Like, our town also is famous for like the highest incidence of brain tumors in any county that size. So
I'm sure it's coincidental, right?
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, I don't know if they really have motivation to do that.
Right.
I can't really speak to their business, but
Right.
But who knows? It seems like they sort of moved in early enough that they probably can do just about whatever they want.
Right.
And I'm sure they own all like tons of land, and
Right, sure.
it's right on the coast. I'm sure that has a lot to do with it.
Oh, it's on the Texas coast?
Yeah, it's
okay.
Freeport, Texas is really where the plant is, but
Right.
it's all one little area.
Okay, so did you have siblings?
I do still, yeah.
And were you like, was your family musical?
My mother's a piano player, and she taught piano when I was a kid.
Did she teach you piano?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, from the time I was like 3 or a little baby.
So what are your earliest musical memories? What were your early influences?
Well, it's kind of twofold. She taught me piano, and she listened to jazz, and I remember hearing her play like Debussy and stuff like that because my room was right next to her lesson studio, and so a lot of these songs that she played are really stuck in my head, and still stuff that I play, now.
Do you find some of those melodies like creeping out in your own songwriting and stuff?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's not like Debussy's arabesque is like all this like 2/3 idea, and that's kind of fundamental to what I ended up doing on the guitar. And I doubt it's a coincidence.
Right.
But like that sort of Travis Pick bass stuff.
Right.
It's all like 2/3.
Right.
Like that sort of thing.
Oh right, yeah, okay, yeah, sure.
Like syncopation, like
sure.
And Debussy's not the only place that exists, but I'm sure that learning that stuff at an early age probably, helped me a little bit when I started getting into those styles.
You just totally reinforced why I am forcing my own children to take piano lessons. So thank you.
It's awesome. You should.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Piano was actually supposed to be my first instrument. When we were kids, I have 2 older brothers, and my oldest brother played guitar. My middle brother played bass. And so when it came time to my turn, I was like, well, I can't do what they did. So I was like, Mom, I want to play piano.
Yeah.
And she actually went out, bought us a piano, and it sat there for like a year, and I never touched it, and I never took a lesson. And then I finally went, Mom, I want to play guitar. And so I never got to the piano, but it's it's something that I've learned a little bit through helping my kids with their piano lessons.
Man, I don't know what the answer is, because my mom's a piano teacher, and I ended up playing piano, and I love piano, but
Sure.
There was a time, because guitar is probably my real main instrument. There was a definite time from like 5th grade through end of high school where I was like, fuck the piano. Like, I want to play guitar. I want to rock out.
Right.
And so
right.
like I didn't really practice. And now when I play piano, I'm like, I blew it. So, you know what I mean? Like, I should have just been practicing that. Like,
because what you realize when you're an adult is, God, the only time in your life that you can sit there and do something, whatever it is, whether it's surfing or piano playing or whatever, and you can just do that all day long is before you're 18.
Yeah.
Because then real life happens.
I wish they would let you do the whole thing in reverse.
Totally.
Like if
I'm such a great student now.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I've got like so much stuff that I want to learn, but I'm like in the middle of a music career.
Yeah.
It doesn't really permit me to play music that often.
Right.
It's fucking crazy.
I know. It's ridiculous.
It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so what were you listening to then? Like, what were it sounds like you have a grab bag of influences there, from jazz to country to, I'm guessing, rock and roll and punk rock and stuff eventually.
Well, that was what I was going to say, is that the kind of the other side of my musical background comes from my uncle and my grandparents. My uncle's a flat picker guitar player and plays bluegrass. And from the time I was a little kid, we always went to this one bluegrass festival, like 3 hours away from our town, which is on this campground where eventually my uncle ended up moving. But he played in a bunch of bluegrass bands, and when I picked up guitar, he taught me fiddle tunes and eventually like Doc Watson style, playing. And so it was a lot of different things, but that was the thing that made me really like, I want to play professionally.
Right.
Like I think seeing him play on that weird stage, in front of all those lawn chairs, I was like, this is so cool. And they would let me hang and, sing songs with everybody and stuff like that.
When you were a kid?
Yeah.
Really? So how old were you when you first got up and started kind of performing?
Well, I think first performing was probably not till like 5th grade or something. You
Right.
know, like
That's
really,
still very young, though.
Yeah. I started playing guitar when I was in elementary school.
Okay.
Or even before, you know, and then I really took to it around 5th grade, I think. And yeah, that's where it forever is just, that's where it goes.
So when did you hit on what you're doing now? I mean, if you were touring in a punk rock band at 17, at what point did you become like sort of, I mean, I don't know where you sort of label yourself genre-wise, but when did you start doing the sort of singer-songwriter thing?
I was doing it kind of at the same time.
Right.
I wrote my first record around that same time period that I went on tour with that band.
Okay.
So...
How old were you when that first record came out? Because that was like 2011, right?
Gosh, it was before.
Well, it was before
So
that.
yeah, my bio is a little false.
I go by the way Spotify lists it,
Yeah.
and it's often wrong.
Well, there's another one that isn't on Spotify because I wasn't on a label.
Oh, okay. So this is your new album is your 4th album,
Yeah.
not your 3rd album. Okay,
Yeah,
got it.
totally. I don't know why, but they don't want to talk about it. I've been instructed not to talk about my first record.
Okay. Was it reggae or something?
No, it's
okay.
the same shit. I
Okay.
mean, I was very young. You know,
Right.
it sounds like I was 18. That's
Right.
probably when it came out. I was like,
Did that come out on New West as well?
no,
Okay.
no. They actually.
How'd you get it out?
I had a little bit of money. I was also really fortunate. So from the time that I was like in 7th or 8th grade, I started teaching because my mom was a piano teacher, and I had this guitar teacher who went on tour with a Christian band. And when he left, he gave me half of his students. So imagine in like 7th grade, I'm making $25 an hour.
Great.
Like, I had insane money for a kid.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I kind of just like never quit doing that. When I
Right.
moved to Houston and even still now, like I don't really teach for money anymore, but it's still something that I really enjoy doing.
Right.
So anyway, I had money saved up and I recorded the record and pressed 300 vinyls. And then I put it on my website for free or something.
Right.
And then I think that record was in the record store in Houston that the president of New West or the owner of New West happens to have a hand in. And he heard that record and then offered me the deal for this current thing that I'm in, you know?
You know, I get asked all the time questions about sort of the state of the music industry, or, you know, what advice would you give to a young musician who's just starting out? And I'm always totally stumped because I haven't been a young musician starting out in a long time. And in the years since I was, you know, when I was first making records and on an indie label and all that sort of thing, it was a completely different ball game, you know? So I don't know what it's like for somebody in 2016 to be, you know, on their 2nd record or 3rd record, whatever it is, and to be on a small label and out touring and sort of like the business side of that. Can you talk a little bit about what that's like for a young artist coming up today? And granted, like I get it, you're not a total greenhorn. You're 4 albums deep into a career, but you know, I'm just wondering what it's like, what your experience has been.
Well, I could definitely speak to it. I mean, that alone, I'm 4 albums in.
Right.
If I had told myself as a kid in the 90s, you know, you're going to be on one of the bigger independent labels and you're going to have 4 albums out.
Right.
I would think in my child mind, that means you're going to be fucking wealthy and you're going to have like so many
limousines
fans.
and champagne,
which
baby.
is not the case. And like for all of the great press and all of the touring I've done, like I'm still constantly surprised at like, you know, Boise on a Friday night, there could be 20 people there. You know what I mean? Like there's no way to really know. So I think maybe because of the generation before me, I had some unrealistic expectations about what being a successful musician meant.
Right.
And I'm not complaining at all. Don't get me wrong. Like I love what I'm doing. And I guess advice that I would give, I don't really think about the money thing that much. Like I said, I've never really worried about money. I didn't come from money. Mm-hmm. You know, I've never really had a ton of it. You know, my family was broke.
Right.
So like I've kind of gotten comfortable in that world and money always is kind of taken care of itself if you just like bust your ass and work hard.
Well, you can always go back to that teaching gig with those 25 students or whatever.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, like I know in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, if this doesn't work, there's ways to make money.
Right.
So I just don't think that can be the driving force behind what you're doing.
Right.
Because if it is, you're destined to fail.
Right.
You should get in a different business.
And how is it dealing with your labels? New West, is that a big label? I mean, I know they're like an indie, but
yeah.
When I was younger, I was in a band that was on Fat Records, the punk rock world. And when I needed something, I would just call Fat Mike, and he's the head of the label, and he would either say yes or he would say no, and it was really simple.
What do you mean? Like if you needed what?
Well, if we had an idea for something that we, whatever, I don't even remember, a tour or, an advance for the record or whatever it was, you know what I mean? Nowadays, for me, like there's like a managerial firewall between me and the label. So my only dealings with like Foo Fighters record labels, like they come and say we're great, and and they're all cool, and it's great. We don't talk business. There's none of that. But when you know what I mean. But when I was a kid and first making records, I would like I said, I would call Fat Mike, or I would call his wife, or I would call whoever the label head was at that time, and they would say yes or no. It was really simple. It was small. Yeah. They're all my friends. They're part of my social life. How is it for you dealing with your label?
Well, I went through a similar transition. Like when I first signed with them, I didn't have a manager, and I'm a neurotic son of a bitch. So like I called them, like probably once a day. Yeah. That label would get a phone call from me like, hey, what's going on with this? What are we doing with this? Like, and a lot of the people that worked there then are no longer at the company. And,
right.
And since then, I have a manager who I really trust, and I think that wall is pretty important for a lot of reasons. I talk to my manager every day, and he kind of does the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I think
people get uncomfortable when the quote unquote artist is dealing with them directly. I've found that. And that's the world that I come from. So I think that I blundered early on in sort of the larger world of being maybe a little too direct with people.
I love to call, and I still, though, that said, my manager does most everything, but I still call that label just randomly just to be like, hey, what's up?
Right.
Just want to know what's going on, and there is always a sense of surprise in their voice, of like, why are you calling us?
What did we do wrong? What's wrong?
But I know what you mean. It's like it's weird to like be in business with somebody and not really work with them. It seems like a strange thing, but there is that thing of like, I guess they can't really. They feel like you're too close to it or something.
Right.
Like you can't be objective.
And no one wants to say no to you.
Yeah. But that's essentially what they're doing.
Right. Well, sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, sometimes they have to,
People like me and you would rather them just say no directly to us than go through the whole thing.
Right.
Because that's kind of insulting, isn't it? Like,
yeah, totally.
If they're
that's the funny thing about it. Maybe it's all businesses, but it's certainly the entertainment industry. Nobody wants to say no. And so if they have to say no, you'll probably just never hear from them again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's sort of that thing,
Totally. Yeah, I don't know. I think that I'm still very fortunate to like know everyone at that label personally.
Right.
And like have hung out with them, and I really trust and respect all of them. A lot of them now are from other people, from other businesses. Like the new president, John Allen, used to work at BMG, and I knew him for years before he worked at the label. And Kim Bowie used to be head of A&R at Lost Highway. And just through like dealings in the music business, I just knew them, became friendly with them, and they coincidentally started working at the label.
Right.
So I think I might have a unique relationship in that I can call all of them and just be like, what's up with this? When are we putting this out or whatever?
I watched a YouTube clip of you playing a George Jones song,
cool.
The Grand Tour, which is like, the most heartbreaking song of all time. Like just such a gem of songwriting craft. But I think in the intro to it, well, first off, I mean, you did a great version of it.
Thank you.
And I always like to see, because I sometimes play that myself and have a little way that I worked out that little, the piano intro thing. Yeah, you know what I mean? So I always like to see how other people tackle the similar thing and how they do it different. But I think you said in the intro to it that George Jones is one of your biggest influences. And in your bio, you talk about, maybe you don't talk, but your publicist talks about like references like Paul Simon and John Prine and Randy Newman and some real like heavyweight songwriters.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about your songwriting process or technique or how you approach it.
Yeah, sure. I guess those are kind of two sides because, George Jones is a singer, an
Right.
amazing singer.
Right.
I don't think he would be lumped into that category of songwriters.
Right, sure, yeah. I mean, but that song in particular is
Yeah.
such a
God.
perfectly crafted country song where, like, it never tells you what happened, but it's so
know.
heartbreaking.
so
There's so much
good.
mystery to it, but it's so direct.
And the
you
house,
know what I mean?
the house is like a character, you know,
Right.
in the song. It's,
Yeah.
it's really beautiful. But he didn't write that.
No,
some
yeah,
writer wrote
sure.
that. But man, he sings the shit out of it.
Yeah,
like
he
I'm
does.
sure, I'm sure I would much rather hear him sing it than the guy who wrote it. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Those are kind of two sides of influence. Like George Jones to me is like the pinnacle of somebody who just like is a performer and a singer, and he enabled the people around him to do their job. You know, he
Right.
found the best song. He got the best producer.
Yeah.
Had the best band.
Yeah.
And then he did his job really well.
Right.
And because of that, you have like this perfect union of everything, and the music is gigantic.
Right.
You know, it's just like...
Yeah.
And then the people we were talking about a minute, you know, Paul Simon, Randy Newman, those are sort of like singer-songwriters. You know,
Right.
like they represent their craft
Yeah.
in a way. And so, yeah, on both sides, I mean, I think what I do is probably a lot more akin to them.
Sure.
Because I'm heavily involved on the, you know, production side and the writing side and all that stuff. And it's really fun for me, and I enjoy it. I don't think I would want to just be a singer.
Right.
You know, I like writing, and I would even hope that someday I'd get to write for other people. And you
Right.
know, Randy Newman's biggest hit was, you know, You Can Leave Your Hat On, which wasn't his hit first.
Oh, really?
You know, that was who did that? Shit, you need Google. Paul Newman, or not Paul Newman?
That would be
not
great.
Paul Newman. Yeah, that'd be a great
Yeah,
one.
I never knew
What's
he
his
was
name?
Randy's cousin.
What's his name? I'll think of it in a minute. You Can Leave Your Hat On. You're gonna know who I'm talking about in a
Right.
minute.
But how do you approach songwriting? Like when you sit down to write a song, what do you do?
Ah, gosh.
Or is it different every time?
It's kind of different every time. I'm a weird, I'm definitely like a habitual sort of study, you know, writer. Like when I'm writing, I sit down from 9 to 5 and like
Right.
journal, and like,
Sure.
I don't really have a process as much as I have like just a workflow and a sort of like show up at the office mentality.
Right.
You know,
When
what
do
I
you
mean?
know it's done? When do you know your song is done?
I don't know. That's a really tough
Is it
one.
ever done?
Yeah, I don't know. At some point, you have to just be like, that's good, and leave it alone.
Yeah.
But sometimes that's 3 years. You know, like I've had
Right.
songs that have been revised and revised and revised, and then finally I'm like, that's good, that's done.
Yeah.
And then other ones, you write it in an hour, and you're like,
Yeah.
cool, that's finished.
There's certain songwriters like Merle Haggard comes to mind. Is a great example, and this is something personally as a songwriter I absolutely struggle with and wish I could get a handle on. A guy like Merle Haggard is so economical.
Yeah.
I mean, some of my favorite Merle Haggard songs are one verse and one chorus.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Concise.
Yeah, it
Perfect.
and it gets right to
Yeah.
the heart of it, and that is so freaking hard to do. I feel like, at least for me, it is.
Yeah. That's a big part of my process, though, is like editing.
Paring it down.
Yeah, and revising, and knowing when to get rid of good shit. Knowing
Right.
that, like, just because there was a cool metaphor in the third verse, the third verse overall is just taking away from what you're trying to do.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And being able to be like, okay, get it out of there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what is, Today I Started Loving You Again? That's just a chorus and a verse.
That's the song I was thinking of.
Yeah, that's just
That
one chorus
and
a verse.
Yeah, and holding things together.
Yeah, there's-
chorus and a verse.
Oh,
That's
God.
it.
Willie does it too. All of those guys, like, they're
Yeah.
some of their best stuff. You're like, that's really all that was in this? Like, it seems so simple.
Right, yeah. I know. And then you try to do it, and you're like, God damn, how come I've got 3 pages of shit that doesn't work?
Yeah, totally. Oh, I wish we could have talked to Merle Haggard and known. Like, I would love to. I know he wrote that song. He was on tour, and he said he just looked up at his
It's Bonnie Owens.
yeah, and he just was like, "Today I started loving you again," and it came to him.
Yeah.
But I wonder if he sat down and just wrote it, or if he like had a bunch of shit and revised it down to just that.
Yeah, who knows, man. I did get to interview him last summer.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
And
fantastic.
I don't remember now. I would have to go back and listen, but I don't remember if I even got into sort of songwriting process. It's an interesting thing when you talk to guys from his generation, himself included. They are so much less sentimental.
Yeah.
I mean, probably people listening to this podcast have heard me kvetch about this over and over, but it is true. at least in my experience, that they aren't sentimental about their gear, about the
Yeah.
sort of, 1962, about how they wrote what they wrote. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I don't know if inside they are, and maybe they're just a little more guarded than all of us are. But you know what I mean? You talk to these guys, they're just like, yeah, I don't know. It was just what was in the studio, you know?
Yeah. I think I have a little bit of that. I find it kind of funny to nerd out too much
Right.
on stuff, gear especially. Like,
Yeah.
people are always asking me about the guitar. Like, I have this shitty classical that I was doing a lot of sessions with yesterday. One of the guys in the sessions is like, man, that's such a great sounding guitar. It's so hard to find a good classical. It's like a $200. You know what I mean?
It was on sale at Guitar Center.
Yeah, like I didn't even think about it.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
like picked it up and was like, this is the one I'm going to use. You know what I mean? Like,
I was listening to some of your stuff, and is that you play? Do you play all the guitar on your records, or most of the guitar?
we split it between me and Kelly. Kelly Doyle is the guitar player that is in my band.
Oh, okay. Who's doing all the fancy stuff on Drivin and also the High Road?
That's
I
both
think the
of
High
us.
Road had some nice classical
Yeah.
sounding nylon string there.
Well, that's both of us. On Drivin, I'm playing the acoustic guitar part,
Okay.
which is harmonized with Kelly playing the B-bender telly.
That's
but
what
it's
that is.
the same
Okay.
line, but they're harmonized together.
Right.
And then High Road, I play all the nylon stuff, and he plays the telly.
So you're a ripping guitar player.
Well, thank you.
You're not just the guy. You're not just the cute guy out in front of the mic and the acoustic. Not through the PA.
Well, that's where I mean, before I was really doing my thing, that's where we all met. Is
Right.
like being sidemen for other people.
Right, right.
And doing studio work, and we sort of like found one another. Like, oh, this
Right.
is another weirdo who likes country music and free jazz, or whatever it
Right.
was at the time. We were like, oh, we're the same.
Yeah,
So-
we've got that same thing.
Yeah.
That's interesting. You said you were doing some session work yesterday. What were you recording on?
Well, yesterday I was doing like taped, like the Pace sessions or stuff
Are you
like
out
that,
here on
yeah.
like a promo run
Yeah.
to set up? When does your new album come out?
June 3rd.
Okay. You want to talk a little bit about that? Like talk about the making of your record or why it is self-titled 4 albums into your career?
I've talked about that a couple times recently. I don't really have a good reason.
Right.
Definitely wasn't that.
You're just like, I can't make anything else up right now.
Yeah,
That's
I
it.
know. The record's
Just
fucking
take
done.
it.
I've
Yeah.
been working a month straight. Do I have to title it? What I said yesterday on the phone talking about, I was doing some interview and they asked about the self-titled thing. I think it's really easy to go back and look at what you've done and then assign a narrative to it that
Right.
suits whatever it is that, like when the reality is I just was like, that feels right.
Right.
Just call it that, you
Yeah.
know? And that's sort of the way that a lot of the recording went too. Like a lot of it was happy accidents and just being free to improvise and then being like, that was good.
Right.
Do
you record with a bunch of guys live in a room together?
It's a combination. This record was really different. I produced it, so it's kind of half and half. There's a bunch of programmed elements on this record, so it was really important for me having programmed elements to also juxtapose that with like performances where there's a lot of wrong notes and a lot of improvisation, and because otherwise I feel like the programmed stuff doesn't have the same life in it or something.
Right,
You know,
right.
like if you have something that's so on beat and so in tune, and there isn't also on top of it something that's kind of wild and improvisy,
Yeah.
it sucks the life out of it or something.
Totally. I mean, it's the weird way that making records has evolved in the digital age, where even before everybody was recording on Pro Tools, I feel like my generation, maybe even the generation a little bit before me, the focus became on everything being really tight.
Yeah.
And the focus was no longer on just like the vibe of the song or how
Yeah.
it sounds together. And then, of course, once computers came into the picture, not to be like, Grandpa hates computers, but like, once that came into the picture, it did create this visual element where you're like, nope, the kick drum and the bass hit, or those have to be
Line
exactly
'em up.
together. Yeah,
totally. You could
Instead of
just-
just using your ears.
Totally. It's crazy when you get really into it. I don't know how nerdy you want to go down this road, but like if you do engineer and you work in Pro Tools a lot and you start getting into this gridding and tuning world, to me, to my musical ears, it becomes very confusing and very complicated to know what is actually correct. Like in tuning, for instance, if you were to take every track on a song and in Melodyne grid it 100%, does it sound in tune? Like, here's what I'm saying is like the way the overtone series works is super complicated, like extremely complicated.
Right.
If somebody goes and tunes your piano, they tune it by ear to tuning forks still, because A at 440 and then the next A in the series, if they're exactly perfect, it doesn't sound right to your ear.
Right.
So every tuning of every instrument throughout history has been compensated in some way to our ear. And now we're in this weird paradigm with computers where we can go 100%, put it on 100%.
Right.
And then you listen back and you're like, that doesn't sound like any music I've ever heard.
Right.
You know? And
interesting. Yeah, that's...
The same with gridding drums. Like if you start gridding out drums and you don't grid all of them, it's like... it's all relationship oriented. If you move one kick drum, you then have to move the following kick drum.
Right.
And then you have to figure out what the hi-hat's doing.
Yeah.
And it all falls to pieces.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
I guess they were onto something back in the days when you just had to be good.
You just did your You just did your thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, God forbid we make music with our ears and listen to what we're doing.
Yeah. Right.
Like that's crazy.
Yeah. No, it's funny, man. It's funny. Like, I sometimes I get on my high horse about like back when I used to first start making records, but I'm like, man, you go back to Buck Owens and those guys. They were on a budget.
Yeah.
They were recording 4 songs in a couple of hours, and they had to be like perfectly spot on.
Yeah.
You know?
And there's mistakes all over those records.
Absolutely.
They also
Things are sharp and flat.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
They're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
They realize that like personality is really what's important.
That's
in all
the
that
magic.
shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
And shit, I mean, if you go and try to learn, you probably know this, listening to Buck Owens records, the vary speed on the tape machine would be fucked up sometimes. And so you'd be like trying to learn something, you'd be like, why is this like kind of almost in E flat?
Totally.
You know what I mean?
A lot of those records.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. Try to play along and put together a honky tonk playlist.
Yeah.
In your Spotify. Good luck.
Yeah.
Stones records are the same way, where I think they just tune up in a room. You know?
Yeah.
Just like, oh, we're in tune.
It's great. We would never let that fly.
No.
If
all this stuff that we think is so great about the way records were made in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, none of us actually allow onto our own records.
Yeah.
It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, we're very scared.
Yeah. I mean, I'm as guilty of it as anybody, you know?
Well, so kind of to go back, that was sort of the thing, was like in making this record and having these things that are very modern and having Pro Tools at my disposal, I had set limitations, you know, like when I did all the pre-production and planning, I set like global limitations for the record. I said, I want to use these 2 synthesizers. I want to use these 2 analog synthesizers. I have in my computer thousands of soft synths. Right. You know, like I could find any sound in the world. Yeah. But giving myself that limitation, and you know, they're not synths that are one-dimensional. They could do a lot of things, but they're just hardware. Yeah. And I only can use those. Then I'm not wasting a ton of time, you know, going nuts in the studio. And also, like, there's a song called Screw on there, or It's Not Okay, or a lot of those solo sections were like, we learned the changes, we improvised it one time, and that's what's on the record. And we could have done it better, right? You know, maybe. Yeah. But I think we really could have just done it different. Right. You know, sure. So it was way cooler to me to just like throw it on there. Yeah, keep it with the spark. Yeah. Of the fact that it was the first or second time you ever worked it out. Yeah. Yeah. It was cool. Yeah. Cool, man. Yeah. Hey, going back to something you said earlier, because I think that was pretty much everything I wanted to get to. You mentioned your uncle or grandpa or somebody was a bluegrass picker, and that you went to bluegrass gigs growing up. My cousin, well, first off, you probably don't know this, but we are somehow distant cousins because my aunt married into the Ellis family years ago. So we're cousins by way of marriage, but then I have a cousin by some long stretched out way who's in a bluegrass band in Texas. So if you ever cross paths with them, you got to go up and say, "What's up, cuz?" Maybe someday you'll be at the same gig. Who knows? They're called Carl Shiflett and Big Country Show or something like that. Cool. They're a really cool, like old school style bluegrass band. Wow. And Carl Shiflett's son
is named Chris Shiflett, which, is
Yeah.
bizarre. And we finally met on Facebook, and then he came to some shows that we did down in Texas.
Wow.
And now we text each other like, what's up, guys?
That's amazing.
Yeah. So there you go. That's our long, the big circle of family there.
Yeah, we could be related. I think it's Welsh.
Could be, yeah. There's Peter Ellis, my uncle, was English. He has since passed away.
Yeah.
But then if you ever play with a band called Wolf Alice, Peter's brother's son, Theo Ellis, is the bass player. And a great kid.
I'm not following anymore.
It's very confusing.
You lost me.
Yeah. Speaking of which, if you want to play a song, sometimes people do, sometimes people don't. It's completely your call, no pressure.
Sure.
But
yeah,
yeah,
I'll do
it'd
it.
be
Can I
great.
borrow a guitar?
Yeah, you can borrow that one right there. Yeah.
What am I supposed to do? Just drive around the fairgrounds another time or two. Where am I gonna go when the girl behind the counter at the coffee shop gets tired of me hanging around with nothing left to say, trying to get away? I'm bored out of my mind, and I've changed all the light bulbs and had this conversation about 3 million times or more. Guess I'll walk around the grocery store again. Oh, this don't feel like living. It's just surviving. I ain't going nowhere. Oh, I'm just driving. I know that you're upstairs, and I'm down here watching television, trying to make some sense out of the way it feels to be so close to you and feel so far away. Oh, I just wish you'd go to bed without the expectation that I'd come up there and say something to help you feel like things aren't such a mess. I'll just sweep the floor and clean the desk, put up the dishes and then fold some clothes, I guess. Oh, this don't feel like living. It's just surviving. I ain't going nowhere. Oh, I'm just driving.
All right, I'm just going to throw that into Beat Detective. Okay. Just kind of get it just right.
Just 100%. Yeah, grit it.
Thanks so much, dude, for coming down. That rules.
Thank
That was
you.
amazing.
Man,
Sounded great.
thank you. Hell
You're
yeah.
just an amazing guitar player.
Yeah,
She would have gone
yeah.
to the moon if that's what it took to follow him. It's funny what love makes you do.
Okay, that was Robert Ellis. Make sure you check out his great self-titled record that came out last June. I know he's been touring a lot, and he's, I think, about to go to Europe. A bunch of shows coming up in Europe. So for all our European listeners, make sure you go out there and catch one of his shows. You can find him at either robertellismusic.com or on Twitter at Robert Ellis. So there you go. Check him out. And don't forget, as always, get in the iTunes store, subscribe to Walking the Floor, listen to all the past episodes, and hey, keep your chin up. It's gonna get rough out there. That's it for this week. Adios, amigos!
Fall in love again someday. I'm not gonna hold my breath.